Welcome back. Thank you very much. We are trying to work out how to come back from a break.
Yeah, this is the first time we've done it.
We don't know.
Well done. I think welcome back works.
We'll be better on the next one. Thanks.
Yeah.
And so,
stay with us. This Q&R section is going to be amazing.
Yeah, hallelujah.
Well, it's going to be something anyway.
The room are excited. So we're going to work through some questions that we have had from people. Thank you very much for sending those in. And we are committed to Q&R. And if you don't know what Q&R is, it's a question and response.
Yeah, because Jonny doesn't like question and answer because he's like, I might not have an answer, but I'll have a response. Hey! Correct. Thanks, everyone.
So
here all week.
Our first question is from Becky, who says, Sarah and Jonny, from the last 12 months, can you tell us what theme or practice has helped you the most and why?
So I like that. I've loved all of them. I've really enjoyed practicing silence and solitude, and I've really loved talking. That's one of my faves. Spiritual experiences, all of that. But I think early in the kind of Soul Path journey of 2024, we started to think about this idea of feasting. And as someone who likes food, I was very excited about that idea. And we looked at kind of celebration and hospitality. We looked at praise within that. But essentially, just the power of gathering around a table. And the table could look like a walk in the park. It doesn't have to be a literal physical table. But it could look like a coffee. Just the power of being with people, of meeting, eating, and praying together. And so this year, I've just started to do that a little bit more intentionally. I've started to open my home. I was convinced to buy a pizza oven. And I bought a pizza oven on the specific proviso that we used it every week. I have to say we've pretty much used it every week.
Well done. Nice.
And most of the time that's with other people. So that's been really good. So, but yeah, I think just being really intentional about gathering with people, it would be a natural part of kind of how I live anyway, but I think there's something about this value practice plan thing, you know, so I value being with people and hearing and learning from one another and sharing life together. The practice then is that we eat together, and I've got a kitchen table, so come and eat at my kitchen table.
Great.
And then the plan is that we specifically put that in the diary. So there are non-negotiable dates in the diary that are open house, that people are invited to come and eat pizza and pray together. Everyone make their own pizza, but you know, we'll provide all the toppings and whatever. And that has become such a source of just growing in community, getting to know new people, connecting with people, and we very simply pray together with each other when we do that. And yeah, I've really, really enjoyed being much more intentional about thinking and seeing that as a practice, as a way of connecting with God and others. Okay. How about you?
Well, you stole mine.
Oh.
In the notes, we were supposed to talk about feasting, but that's okay.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm
yeah, we don't always stick to the notes. Everyone, thanks.
Feasting is really important. I think there is something redemptive in talking about feasting as a community. I think we can get a little bit puritanical about feasting. I think we can, yes, fruit of the Spirit is self-control. Absolutely. That doesn't void that, but we're also invited to experience wonder. Yeah. And I think feasting invites people to wonder, and awe and celebration and joy, which are also gifts and some fruit seasoned in there too, that I don't think we have perhaps historically the best relationship with. I think we are used to misery and, trying to contort ourselves.
I really wanted to say something sarcastic then. I just let it go. Let it go. Did you see that self-control at work? Thanks.
You're being recorded. And so I've enjoyed looking at feasting and hopefully inviting other people to feel more okay about what you've just described, or if it doesn't need to be. So let me just fully send it and then we can work backwards. I think feasting we have perhaps too quickly and falsely attributed to opulence or decadence or the things... Indulgence, things that make us nervous as people of faith. And there is good reason to be cautious around those things. Of course there are. And we are not defined by excess. We're conscious that we live in an age and in a time where hedonism is very real. Escapism.
It's back on the agenda.
It's back on the agenda. It's swung back around. Escapism is high as the world is on fire, it would appear. But actually, I am a huge believer in things that are totemic and things that mark moments and things that help us navigate. So we're trying to tie all these things together, right? So our directional decisions through our existence can be marked by, and we seem to have an understanding of this in other parts of our life. We seem to understand it's significant to mark birthdays or milestones. When we're recording this in a week or so's time, we're going to mark the arrival of the divine within the creation with a feast of some iteration, right?
Christmas Day is coming.
We're going to celebrate that. We seem to understand the turning of a calendar page is significant and is important, and we have possession of marking these moments in other areas of life, but we don't seem as well versed in our tradition of doing that in other formational habits. So feasting is really important. And then for the same reason, silence. Yeah. That's something that we talked at length on the podcast around.
Yeah, they're really good, the ones on silence. You should go back and listen to
them. And not ironically silent. But that's a practice that I find much easier than you do.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know how anyone would guess otherwise. But right.
There are some clues. But again, I think that is important to us in community, in that it has perhaps sometimes been misunderstood, or there is a projection into that space for those who perhaps are naturally more inclined to silence. To like, hey, come on, you need to contribute, you need to be loud, you need to project yourself into the space, you need to, even if it makes you uncomfortable or you don't like it, you need to whatever. And there's a time and a place for that, and that can be true for sure. We can't hide behind silence, but there is also as much validity in learning to hear in silence and learning to practice silence, and sharing space with other people in silence is really, really important, and makes
and a bit awkward. So
Pentecostals so nervous. Somebody will start doing something, and that's okay. There's room for that, and it's going to take time for us all to be comfortable in larger gathered moments in silence, and that's okay. But I've really enjoyed those specifically. They've been super helpful.
Yeah, and I think the rhythm stuff as well, of like, the feasting is good and the silence is good, but also fasting is good, and then noisy, loud praise is good. And so it's not that one is better than the other, but that these all form part of the toolkit of the unpacking of the rucksack. We use that image a lot to go like, what have we been given in God? It's not that we're like having to add loads of things in, but we're actually unpacking the things that we've already got in God. And part of that is also this idea of rhythm, that sometimes we lean into feasting in certain ways, and then other times we lean into fasting, and sometimes we'll lean into noisy praise and celebration, and other times we'll lean into silence and contemplation. And people in our community have actually, that's one of the things, this idea of silence and solitude, that a lot of feedback that we've had from our ELC community have been, that was brilliant, this has been great. Shane was one of those people. He was like, being silent before God with no agenda has kind of helped him with this idea of like not wanting to feel like he has to perform in some way. And he's been looking, Soul Path has helped him to sort of look past and ask big questions like, how am I following Jesus, and what does that look like? Shane also has some really good questions. So I'm going to kick off with the next question, if that's all right. So Shane, here is your first question. It says, how does Jesus' declaration in John 14 verse 6, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father except through me, shape the concept of a Christian's soul path?
Nice.
Great question.
Thanks, Shane. I think there's a few ways that you and I have talked about our understanding of this question. And as I've reflected on it and read some more around it, there's a lot happening with those I am statements, right? And we already know from John that Jesus already said he's bread, which we've talked about before.
Again, if you go back to the feasting episodes, you might find some stuff there.
Can touch on that. And the significance and the value of Jesus doing that. And then he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And he's had this question from Thomas, who's getting a little bit twitchy. And Thomas...
He's like trying to understand, isn't he? Like, what are you saying? What are you doing? What's this about?
Yeah, he's trying to put the pieces together.
I think Thomas gets a bad rap, man.
Gets a very bad rap. Bless him. That was condescending, wasn't it?
I know, but he's just asking the questions that probably everybody else is thinking and a little bit too scared to ask, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's room for some of that. I think the humanity of that makes gives us confidence in this
Yeah.
account. And so Thomas, in the verse earlier, said to him, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way? And so Jesus is pointing back to himself, fresh in hearers' and readers' awareness that Jesus has already said, I am life, in a kind of different way. That's really, really exciting in terms of our ongoing search for peace and fulfillment. And that I think we are used to things that say to us, I can point to the way, or I can show you the way, or I can be a part of your journey on the way, or I can describe something towards the way. And Jesus is like, stop, breathe, it's me. You found it. Like, I am the way, the truth, and life. And so then, to answer Shane's question, or attempt to answer Shane's question, how does that inform your discipleship? Well, then these are not formational habits as a part of a way of being. These are not, so in a couple of weeks' time, we're all, whether literally or figuratively, we're all going to become conscious again of like, oh, I can't eat like I did in December, and I can't, extend some of the graces that I did to myself in December. I'm going to kind of rein it in a little bit, or submit myself to a different way of living. And so the goals then become shared across different values and different ways and different motivations and different ideas and different ideals. And Jesus brings all of that to a point in himself and was like, whatever you are doing is fulfilled in me. And so instead of us submitting ourselves to a temporary plan for a short-term goal or outcome, this becomes about the rest of our existence and forever being known and fulfilled in the person of Jesus. And so now, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Well, because Jesus is life, because Jesus is God, and it's not an addendum or something that I want to patch in or onto my existence. It's not a good habit for a little while before I just kind of cut loose for a little bit.
A little bit like a gym membership.
A little bit like a gym membership.
Look out, January. Hello, here we come.
It's not something that's just good for me in installments. This is what makes me whole, makes me new, where I am secure, significant, and accepted. The things that we kind of help people. And if Jesus is who he says he is and what he says is true, which we believe is the case, he assures us that there's no other way to life. There's no other way to be known and eternally secure, significant, and accepted. It has to be through Jesus.
I love that. And this might be urban legend, but I have heard that this idea of the way, like if we were to ask for directions today, I might get something on like a sat nav or a 3 words, or I might point you down the road and say turn left and right. I've heard that in Jesus' culture, if you ask someone the way, they would say, I'm the way. They would take your hand and they would walk you to the place that you needed to get to, or take you to the place, or take you to the next person to get you to the place. And again, that's idea of this with God life. Like my whole thing is Jesus. Everything I need is found in Jesus. All that I'm about is centered, orientated around Jesus. But I'm also then getting to do life with Jesus, not just for Jesus or because of Jesus. So I think that also really helps us when we think about this idea of, it's with Jesus. He is leading me through life. He is shaping me as we're walking together, as we're walking well together.
Great.
Yeah, it's
really
good. Okay, go on. What's next?
Are we having Shane's part 2?
Yeah, go.
So Shane also asked,
because he's got great questions, everyone.
Had his Weetabix that day.
Thanks, Shane.
Thanks, everyone. What advice would you give to someone struggling to balance worldly responsibilities with their spiritual walk?
So, I think that's a question that lots of people ask. How do I find this thing called balance? How do I balance the needs of all the things that are kind of coming at me, or the requirements of lots of things that are coming at me, or the urgent things that are coming at me? But I think maybe one of the things I would perhaps respond to in that is that I don't think there is a separation between our spiritual walk and the responsibilities that we have perhaps in a job or in a particular area of life. I think they're all the same thing. And so I think one of the things I would encourage anyone who's asking those questions is to see your life as a whole, as integrated, like mind, body, soul, and spirit. Everywhere you are, everywhere you go is this with God life. It's the opportunity to know Jesus and be with Jesus, even in environments where you are not able to perhaps openly talk about Jesus or make it really clear to everyone that the decision you're making is based on your faith in Jesus and what he's asking of you in that moment. And then I would also encourage like prayer as a reflex practice, because that helps us to connect with the loving presence of Jesus 24/7. Nice. Now, it's not easy. Like I've been trying to practice the practice of prayer for a very, very long time. I don't know how practicing I'm getting at it, but I want to get to a place where I am so aware of the presence of Jesus that every moment of every day, every thought, every question, I'm not there, by the way, I'm not Saint Sarah, just putting that out there. But like I want to get to that place where even the things that seem small or insignificant are still a conversation with Jesus, where right. I'm listening and I'm asking. And I know that it's not easy to do that, but I have this value practice plan thing, this intention that this is how I want to live, because I want Jesus' perspective on my worldly responsibilities. I want Jesus' perspective on my devotional life. I want Jesus' perspective. And what I would recommend as a great practice to help you grow in awareness are two things. One is something called a breath prayer, which again, you can go back and listen to some of the episodes. And the other is a prayer practice called the examen. And essentially, you're kind of reflecting on, often you use it at the end of a day, you reflect on the 24 hours and you're looking for things called consolation and desolation, which sound like I'm like a J.R. Tolkien kind of novel. Essentially, you're looking for like, where did I feel most connected with God? Where did I feel least connected with God? What was going on? How can that help me to find and follow Jesus? Where did I most feel God's love? Where did I least feel God's love? And those become these like feedback loops to help us be more aware and attentive to the loving presence of Jesus. Great. So yeah, that would be my response to that one.
Great. Thank you. It's your turn to ask.
Oh yes, my turn. Okay. So Lise gave some really lovely feedback. She enjoyed our episodes. We had some brilliant guests that we were able to record live at our Elim Leadership Conference. And that whole kind of month was around spiritual experiences. And a particular lady we had on called Helen Yousaf was talking about, again, that similar idea really of asking, Holy Spirit, what do you want from me today? How are we journeying together today? How can I be aware of your presence? And Lise has particularly found that helpful and a little bit challenging, I think she said, in like the spiritual and practical ways and the tiny and the big ways. But Lisa was like asking us questions really about resources, I think. Like in the podcast, she says, you both often, and I love this, sprinkle quotes. Thanks very much. We are the sprinkler of quotes. In the podcast, you both often sprinkle quotes from other writers and books. Which one book outside of the Bible have you visited that has had the most impact on your faith or soul path journey, and why? Now, asking Jonny to pick one book is an impossible task. I've never known anyone read so much in my whole entire life, but there we go. Try maybe 3. Do you reckon you could limit it to 3? I'm going to just modify Lisa's question there. Yep,
I will give you 3.
Go.
Knowledge of the Holy by A.W. Tozer.
Classic, literally.
Literally a classic. The Imago Dei by Lucy Peppiette. I think that came out last year. Year before, maybe last year. It's quite
pretty new, yeah.
Quite new, super, super helpful. And Dirt and Stardust by Jeremy Duncan, and it's his look at the Sermon on the Mount.
And I have to say, we have loved that book as a team. We've read that book, and you'll be hearing more about that next year as well. Yeah,
we would recommend that heavily. I like that the spread of those 3 for lots of reasons, and I genuinely could probably picked another 3 and been as happy with the choices, but I think they represent things that we are doing consistently in these conversations and then across what we're trying to do in community. So it's the knowledge of the Holy is giving me an improving perspective of the character of God.
Yeah.
If I understand the character of God, I understand the nature of God. And if I understand the nature of God, that's going to inform the way that I do anything that I do. The Imago Dei is teaching me and reminding me that even at the most bitter points of frustration, others are made in the image of God. And
Which is so helpful to remember,
which is
right?
super helpful. And then dirt and stardust is this continual invitation to do something about it.
Nice.
So the Sermon on the Mount is, as I'm confident we are aware, probably Jesus' longest teaching recorded for us, and it's a lot. And spoiler alert, not everybody loves it and struggles.
He's pointedly looking at me. I don't think that's going to be a surprise to anyone in the room or on the podcast. But I'm learning, I'm reapproaching, I'm unlearning. It's great.
Because it feels to many like it's just so unattainable.
Yeah.
It just feels like this ridiculous way of life that we feel almost condemned by. They're like, well, I just am never going to be able to do that. And I think this book, it's a really easy read, in my opinion. It's written in a way that you can get through it quite quickly. It's really approachable, and it gives you hooks and ways into something that you maybe have spent a lot of time with but felt differently about, or things that have been familiar, because they've got to, I'm making this up, but in my opinion, they've got to be some of the most taught on passages in the Bible. They just have to be. And so if we've been around at all for any length of time, then we have heard somebody else's opinion on these things, which is fine. And that's in part how we learn. But I think Jeremy Duncan has an approach on this stuff that I found really, really helpful, and has reignited my imagination, so much so to a point that we brought that to our team and we're like, we're going to have to read this. And it has proved helpful to others as well in their reapproaching of something that either is so familiar or feels so unrealistic. It's an invitation back into what is central to the living the way of Jesus. So I think that's why I've landed on those three.
Yeah, brilliant. I love it. Also, we are not sponsored by Jeremy Duncan and Dirt and Stardust, but if you ever listen to this podcast, Jeremy Duncan, we love your work.
Thanks, Jeremy. Your book or books?
I've changed my mind since I was thinking about it earlier. So I think, what do I think? There's so many good books. I literally have had so many thoughts about kind of how to do this. But I think some of the kind of pivotal ones that have really challenged and shaped my thinking would be Renovation of the Heart by Dallas Willard. If you read anything from anyone who's doing anything with spiritual formation in the 21st century,
they've read that book.
They will have found a lot of their ideas and thinking will have been shaped by Dallas Willard. So if you come across any Dallas Willard writings or talks, he just thinks beautifully about how you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so it is a big read, and you want to take your time with it. So I've really enjoyed that this year. I love Richard Foster, Celebration of Discipline. Yep. Again, that's a lot of the things that we've been talking about this year. Really, it is a classic, and it's a really practical way. And then I'm a massive fan of Ruth Haley Barton.
You are.
And she leads something called the Transforming Center in America, helping leaders with their spiritual formation. All of her books are brilliant. Like, honestly, every article, every podcast, I'm a massive, massive fan of hers. So anything by Ruth Haley Barton. Again, Ruth, we think you're great.
Great.
Yeah.
Good job.
Good.
Thanks. Where are we going now?
I think let's go across to Katie.
Go on then.
Her reflection. Do you want me to do that or you do that?
You do it.
Okay. So Katie, who's brilliant, has been reflecting on how Soul Path has helped her. And she talked about how it's provided practical tools, opportunity to explore and try ways to keep connected and strengthen her relationship with Jesus. She's also talked about how community and talking honest conversations and sharing good news stories has been really helpful for her. And I'm going to go down to her question. And her question is, how do we make sure we're keeping the Bible in context? I know that I have now not kept our notes in context.
You have not.
Because I have totally,
Thanks.
This is what an Enneagram 7 does. We just bobbed to the next one. But Katie asked the question, how do we make sure we're keeping the Bible in context?
Yep, great question. Really important question. So a couple of things that spring to mind immediately are to extend our capacity to read longer chunks of scripture. Why is that important? Because we receive a tradition of reading maybe a verse at a time, or lifting or identifying an emotion and then looking for a verse to fit the emotion.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is, I understand how and why we've developed that habit, but that is, and that can be really helpful. Devotional reading in that way can, not always, but can be a helpful way to engage with scripture. But what we can get better at is just extending our capacity. So reading maybe the entire chapter, or maybe the entire book, or
really
maybe
good.
the entire run of something which is going to cement its place in context, and you are going to be able to follow the story of God through. You're going to see repeating patterns, and that's on purpose. You're going to see repeating themes, and that's on purpose. You're going to see types of people, and that's on purpose. You're going to see types of events and go, didn't that happen over here?
That bread of life thing might remind me of something that happened in a wilderness in Exodus, right?
Exactly. You're going to see these repeating themes, and that's really helpful. And give yourself a break. You've got your whole life to read this thing. You've got your whole lifetime to inhabit these things and to eat these words, right? Yeah. And so take your time with it. I think often devotional reading can feel... if you're doing it on your own, it can feel a bit sad. It can feel a little bit, especially if you're early on in the adventure, it can feel a bit arduous, or it can feel like a bit of a chore, especially if you are...
Don't start in Leviticus.
A bit hardcore, and you start page 1, chapter 1, and you go, this is interesting. There's a narrative, and there's...
Genesis is exciting, man.
You know, and then you get into some of that other stuff, and you're like, I am less excited about reading this.
I don't know what this means, and if I did, I'm a bit scared.
So how do we keep it in context? We put it in the whole. We put it back where it belongs. We read the whole thing. And we're not the first ones to wrestle with this stuff. So what does church history think about these ideas? Mm-hmm. And so we don't have to behave in the way that they behaved, but we can engage with their ideas.
This is the saints' ideas, right? The global kind of body of Christ that has been and is now.
Yep. So we are a little bit undercooked on our branch of the tree in church history. As Protestants, we were having a protest. We had the hump about some things and have continued to have the hump about some things. I love how you
describe the Reformation as we're having the hump about
we had the hump about a few things. 600 years ago, we had the hump, and we still haven't quite got over it. And that's okay, but they're part of what is exciting and true about what we belong to is that this was true before we got here, and it will be true after we are with Jesus forever. So we can lean back into that and not be intimidated by that or afraid of that. We can learn from those that have gone before. And not everything that's ancient is sacred, so that's okay. We can read with an open mind to that. We're not afraid of broadening our horizons and then comparing that to what we believe to be true. So not everything that has happened in the past is coming with us into the future, but there's been some amazing work done that we would be worse off to just throw away and leave alone. So I think it's a bit of an exploration into church history, what's shaping their thoughts, what was happening in time and place, what's that responding to, what's that speaking to. If you have the appetite for it, get around some communications from a couple of hundred years ago and go, what was happening in the world? What were they speaking to? And why did they lean into those stories? Or what was happening in that moment that made them fetch for those things? And what's happening in our moment that's making us fetch for these types of things? So I think personally, there is an idea that I would like us to get almost like as dirt under our nails, that scripture is written for us, but it's not written to us.
I love that.
So we have to be okay with doing that work, and that we live in an age and in a time where we receive a heritage of literalist fundamentalism, which is fun to say, but has not always given us the best Bible reading habits. And I'm not here to shoot for that today. That's not what we're doing right now. But it has meant that we've struggled with context. Yeah. And we've perhaps played at times a little bit fast and loose with making scripture sometimes fit to what we need it to say.
Yeah, your circumstance or your situation. Yeah.
You can make the Bible say whatever you want it to say.
Rather than what did it mean then and there, and understanding that and then working out from that.
So there is some good work done by Fee and McDonald. Is that right? Is that his surname? McDonald? Google that, check. The book is called How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth.
Yes, Gordon McPhee.
Yes, thank you. Start there. It's maybe starting to feel its age now, and they have more contemporary work, but that might become a gateway to find other resources to go, oh, okay, now let me read a commentary on a specific book from a specific person.
Or a Bible dictionary. There's loads of stuff
dictionary,
online
study
for free
Bible,
for that. Bible Project, we're big fans.
Yeah, and it never supersedes the Word of God. So we're not saying, you should only read the commentary. You've got to read the text. You've got to understand the text. But what will help you understand the text is the collective reading and putting it in time and place. And if you're not sure, ask. I would suggest there's something that happens when we read scripture out loud together.
Yeah.
That's why it's become such an important part of what we do in our gathered times. And it's not because that's quote unquote what we're supposed to do, but that's what this stuff was given for.
Well, and it was given to be read out loud, particularly the letters in the New Testament. It was, and you know, the Hebrew Bible was an oral tradition, so people would tell the stories and share the stories. So they were meant to be heard first before they were read, really, you know? And
don't be afraid of translations. You can run a few side by side. Again, the day and age that we live in, we have the information. It's available to us.
Yes, the application.
So you can run them side by side and go, well, why is that different? Or what's happened there? And who's that group of translators? And what did they want me to know? And what's going on there? And if you're not sure, genuinely send an email. And we love getting stuck into this stuff. And if you find something, somebody did it the other day, there was a group in the building and they're like, what's this? And it was a really obscure note in a commentary. Like, great, that's like a day out for me. That's beautiful.
Send those to Johnny, not to me. That's not a day out for me.
It's not that we have all the answers.
But if you want to share with me what Jesus is talking to you about from the Bible, that's me. I can do that bit.
And it's not that we have all the answers, but it's maybe access to a set of tools and skills to help kind of reflect on some of that. So task yourself, push yourself with reading larger chunks of scripture, read it with other people, and then see what church history has to say about it.
Brilliant. I love it. Great. Should we move on to the next question?
We probably better had.
I don't think there's anything more I can add to that. That's brilliant. I think we've got a couple more questions.
Great.
Do you want to pick another one?
Yeah, let's go for...
Scroll through all the pages of notes.
Up.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. So Tanya had some reflections.
Yes.
We have asked some people, how has Soul Path helped you center your life on Jesus? And Tanya said, it's helped me invite Jesus into the simple daily things that I'm doing, not just for the routine set, mornings and evenings, but throughout the whole day. And you picked up silence has been really helpful. And then off of the back of that, she talked about fasting has not been something that I've particularly picked up over the years. How would you advise someone to do fasting for the first time? What are your best steps in preparing yourself for fasting?
I love it. There's 4 episodes, so I try not to go back over all that we've done around that. But I think it's a really good question because, again, it's one of those things that we may have done in a season of our life or had a go at, or maybe tried it and got really grumpy with everyone and decided that wasn't for us. And so to reapproach it and go, okay, what does it look like? And I love that idea of preparing yourself, because actually, if you're fasting, particularly from food, preparing yourself is really, really important. Preparing your body and preparing yourself for the fact that you are going to intentionally limit what you intake, what you put into your body, in order to connect with Jesus instead in those ways. And so I think preparing yourself for that. So from a really practical point of view, it's things like lead yourself into it. Maybe start little and often. Start with a meal and then talk to Jesus about how that feels. Let like your hunger provoke you to encounter Jesus. So when your belly rumbles, tummy rumbles, that is like a little feedback loop, and you go, oh, okay. Oh, maybe I can talk to Jesus about something. Like, let your physical hunger kind of help you do that. I think we live in a world where we're not necessarily encouraged, particularly with good limits and good boundaries, and yet we see the benefit of them. And so asking some really good questions when you're fasting as well, of like, what's my motivation, God? How am I living from a place of love? Or how am I kind of aligning with you? Or how am I being deliberate about how I'm loving you? I think some of those can be really, really good questions. And then if it's a full food fast and you're going to do maybe a whole day, work yourself up to that. Because if you go, do you know what? I'm going to fast for 3 days this week. I'm not going to eat any food. I'm just going to drink water. By midday on the first day, you will want to hurt people. You will want to move towards physical violence. Violence is not the way of the kingdom.
Amen.
And so start with that and then perhaps work your way to it. I would also say, if you're not used to limiting what your body kind of takes in, eat a reasonably sort of healthier diet before you're going to it, because you'll have a sugar drop off or a caffeine drop off. So maybe just try and limit some of that intake in the lead up to a physical fast. And I would avoid like fizzy drinks when you're fasting from food, because you're just going to give yourself a weird headache. So yeah, that's just not helpful. Drink loads of water when you're physically fasting. There are other ways to fast. I know for some people, medically, fasting from food is not an option. So what are some of the things that are not helping you follow Jesus? Or what are some of the things that feel distracting? Or what are some of the things that feel like time stealers? Or what are some of the things that you're like overtly relying on? Can you fast driving and walk instead? Could you fast technology for a time and embrace silence instead, you know, or things like that? So yeah, I would say just give it a go. And again, with others. So like, you don't have to sort of parade it about like, oh, look at me, I'm fasting today. Thanks everyone. But if you are trying it, get some other people and see if you can do it at the same time, and talk to each other about, oh, my tummy rumbled then, and oh, and I didn't have the caffeine, and this is how it felt. Oh, but then I just heard this thing from Jesus so clearly, and that really encouraged me. So there's some really good things on fasting, and some of the books that we've recommended will help for that, really. But yeah, our physical hunger draws us towards God, I think, if we allow that. But yeah, go for it. Have a go. Talk to people. Lots of water. Reduce your caffeine. That would be my recommendation.
Really good. Little and often would be my recommendation. I think if you can pick a meal a week and then try and grow that, so it's maybe a day a week as part of your regular rhythm, I think it's helpful. And then you learn kind of different things in that. I think be open about it. I think there can be some mystique around fasting. It's almost like it's pro level Jesus follower.
Yeah, for only people who've got to level 3.
Yeah,
there isn't a level 3.
And we would argue gently from Matthew 6 that this is just mandated as part of life with Jesus.
Yeah, when you give, when you pray, when you fast.
Yeah. And so then let's not make it exceptional, let's make it ordinary. And so it just dilutes any temptation to elevate ourselves in it. And also I find it just rolls the edges of making it weird. And if it's something that you're doing regularly, and then you have a relationship with it, and then you find a rhythm in the relationship with it, I would agree, recruiting other people to do that with you. I think we can get a little bit confused about the invitation for your Father who sees what's done in secret will reward you.
Yeah.
And we have misunderstood that to mean I can't tell anybody when I'm fasting, and that's not what that means.
Can I just say, if you are in community with anyone else who fasts, as soon as you start fasting, people are going to know you fasted because, you know, physiologically, a lot of us, I know some people live like, this is not like a health thing, an intermittent fasting thing because we want to lose weight. This is that we are removing something, or we're limiting something in order to like lean into Jesus instead. In totally. That way.
And you're allowed to tell people about that. And you're allowed to say to them, hey, will you pray for me today? I'm fasting and I'm going to need some help and support in that. But then what I found
don't do huge amounts. Can I just say this as well? If you're fasting food, don't do massive physical exercise. I made that mistake once and I keeled over in the gym because I was like, no, I'll be fine. Don't learn from my mistake.
Little and often with other people. And I would, if you're going out of routine, if you've made the effort to do it, then make the effort to be open to the Spirit in it. And so then maybe be alert to, all right, I'm going to write that down because I'm going to need, when my regular rhythm is routine, to process that with the Spirit of God and go, was that I was hungry and that's why I've had a vision? Or was
did
Spirit
I eat too much cheese or did I not eat enough cheese? It's usually my question.
Yeah, right. Did I walk past Mackey's and that just reset everything in me? But you've gone to the effort of going that far. So just record what you're hearing the Spirit invite you into and then process that with people. And if they are walking that road with you, put in the group chat or meet them for a coffee or just connect with them and say, hey, what were you sensing on that day that we're fasting? What was the Spirit saying to you? What did you hear? What did you see? What happened in that moment? And then see what lines up, see what's unique, see what's consistent, see what's true, and then understand what you want to do about it. There is a way of life available to us that we can be quite busy administrating Jesus that we miss entirely. And there is an invitation from the Spirit to be like, if you want to go, we can go. And oftentimes that comes when we're like, all right, come on. We've talked about it for years and years and years. Let's fast lunch today. And every time my belly rumbles, that's an invitation to pray. And also, recovery involves relapse, and we all wish it didn't, but it does. So you're going to pick a day to fast, get to lunchtime, mid-bacon sandwich and go, oh, it's meant to be fasting today.
Please, there's no guilt, shame or condemnation if you've forgotten. Honestly.
You just get to try again another time.
Yeah, for sure.
So try it little and often. That would be my encouragement.
Yeah,
great.
Brilliant. Okay, one more question, and then I think we might take one or two in the room if we've got time.
Yep.
So Dawn has talked about the fact that we often say on the podcast, how can this help you on a wet Wednesday or a wintry Wednesday or a thundery Thursday, whatever you want to say. But essentially, how does this help us in the whole of life when perhaps the feels of the gathered moment or the kind of, yes, I've really got that and I'm running with it, and you get to Wednesday at lunchtime and you've eaten the bacon sandwich, you've forgotten you're supposed to be fasting. So Dawn asks, like, how can you keep this in mind? Perhaps if you're having a bad day or you're grieving, there's an anniversary, or when it just feels like things are going wrong. What does that look like? How can we do that? How can we continue on that soul path?
It's great awareness. It's really good awareness, because so much of what we do formationally is built around what's transactional. And so much can be. So much of what we are invited into can be misunderstood on the invitation of a reward from an external space. And so if I can evidence that I've behaved in the right way, somebody else will approve of me. And what I think the heart of the question is like, no, I want to love Jesus when nobody's watching. I want to faithfully walk with Jesus on the days where nobody cares if I do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. I want to love Jesus then as well. So I think the intent in the question is brilliant, because it speaks to not just because I'm going to be approved of, but in my actual devotion.
Or just because I feel like I should,
right.
Or, because so much of it can feel like a chore then.
So I think it's a really beautiful question. And so I would encourage and speak with people about, we build formation into routine, because now I'm doing it even when I don't want to do it. And so
when I might not have the feels about it.
When I perhaps I'm not being encouraged to do it, or perhaps when I feel far away from other people who are going to help me choose Jesus, or the things of life, or I know this is a heavy thought to kind of land with, but we have these encounters in life where we are reminded that we are not the center of the universe or in control of everything. And in those moments we have decisions to make. Will I honor Jesus and live like I believe he's alive, or will I choose to try and fight and scrap my own way through with my own abilities? And more often than we would all like to concede, we pick the other. And we all like to present that we would always pick the former, and we have lots of opinions about people who publicly perhaps live in a way that we are easier to go, I'm many things, but I'm not that. But privately, we know we are that. And privately, we know we are making those decisions where we've been presented with an opportunity to choose Jesus and we don't choose Jesus. But we perhaps have a little bit more together than socially is easy to present. So I would encourage formation to be folded into routine. What does that mean? What does that look like? I've started spending time with people and encouraging them to think about this question. What do I want for breakfast? Which seems ridiculous.
I mean, usually a bacon sandwich.
Right, there you go.
Thanks.
Because we're now immediately placing ourselves at a fork in the road. And what I think
is
a fork in the road.
Hey!
And what I think
thanks everyone.
is important about that is breakfast is arbitrary, and it doesn't generally matter. And that you get immediately, the first decision of the day, you get to decide. And you can lean into, well, this is what's quick and easy, or what I have access to, or maybe what other people in my household are having, or perhaps it's not the best thing for me. It's not going to set me up for a win for the day, but I'm going to lean into what's easy. We're now starting to see those dots line up to, well, why am I not thinking about what I want for breakfast? Why am I not honoring Jesus in my embodied reality? Why am I not providing nutrients for my existence? Why am I choosing to defer a legitimate need for something that's perhaps easier? Just we're not thinking like this in real time, but we're presented with these options just by thinking about what do I want for breakfast.
Yeah, it's good.
And if I don't make the right choice, it's just breakfast. I get to choose again at lunchtime.
Really good.
I get to have another go a bit later on in the day. And what I'm doing is teaching myself that my formational decisions are just part of my existence. At every fork in the road, at every decision-making opportunity. So if we talk about the renewing of our mind, to kind of put a capstone on Romans 12, instead of waiting for something external to happen to me, I'm now being renewed, and I know the mind of Christ in those decisions, because I am really practiced in just the arbitrary everyday decisions. What honors Jesus in this decision starts with, or can start with, what do I want for breakfast? And we are training ourselves to be cognizant and conscious of like, oh, I have physical needs, I have spiritual needs, I have emotional needs. Now, will I choose to honor Jesus with those, or will I defer to self-sabotage? Will I lean into the way of Jesus, or will I lean away from the way of Jesus? And on the days where we lean away, we just get a reminder at lunchtime of his grace and his kindness and his mercy, because we get to choose again. We're
really
not denied lunch because we got breakfast wrong. So I'm not a breakfast person. Like, I'm a black coffee kind of person. So like, my first decision-making opportunity comes a little bit later in the day. I'm not denied that opportunity because I don't live like everybody else. And if you are a breakfast person and it needs to be nutrients, and speak from your own personal experience of like, hey, I have to care for myself in ways that I didn't have to consider at a different point in my life. It's putting me at what I'm looking for as somebody with the privilege of walking with people in community is to give people decision-making opportunities. So much of our life, the lie is that we have no possession of our existence.
Well, I think that was part of my thinking around waypoints, is like, they're navigational points. These things help us to reorientate ourselves or recenter ourselves, or whatever language you want to use to kind of come back to aligning. Oh God, what is your heart for that? And what is your will or your words? I often talk about the will, the words, the ways, the wisdom of Jesus. Like what is that for that particular thing? Because we have agency. Right. We might not be in control of everything that happens to us or around us, but we have agency in our choices.
Choose and I think that,
and I think that feels such an invitation, and that if we don't make a choice that feels like a good one or a wise one, that Jesus is not there with a big stick telling us off. He's with us to keep shaping us and leading us through our good and our not so good decisions, right?
So we would be advocates of formational behavior for lots of reasons, but in that example, it's win-win.
Yeah.
In that, not by design through negligence or self-sabotage, but either way I get to encounter and experience the presence and the goodness of God.
That with God life,
Even when I get it wrong, my next conscious awareness of the presence of God is his grace and his kindness and his mercy. When I'm aware I haven't chosen the right option, the next fork in the road, I am immediately met with kindness rather than condemnation.
Yeah.
And it sounds too good to be true. And it is.
It is, yeah.
It's the person of Jesus. It's supernatural. It's the creator moving through the creation rather than us trying to scrabble our way, fighting tooth and nail, like elbows out, frustrated, disappointed, broken, annoyed, self-sabotage, death, destruction, sin and disease, going,
just get me to the end of life somehow. Yeah.
But we are invited into the fullness of life, not the fullness of things, not the fullness of other people's approval, not the fullness of getting the answer right on everything, but the fullness of new life looks like Jesus. Even when I get it wrong, you are right. And that's the call.
In view of your mercy, because it's just so much mercy for us, right? Yeah, amazing. Oh, so good. Okay, I am very conscious of time, but I do want to give us a little moment. If anybody has a question in the room before we finish this part and we wrap up and we do all the little noticey bits at the end of our wonderful Around the Fire live podcast. So Katie is on the mic. Does anybody have anything they would like to ask or say or be a disembodied voice on the podcast? Oh, we have Lise. Wonderful.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. And thanks so much for just engaging and listening and giving us your smiles. Very much appreciated.
So my question is to Jonny. You mentioned about silence and the practice of silence. And I was thinking about the podcast on solitude. Which I think probably we're more comfortable thinking about. But silence is something that is difficult to practice. But you talked about practicing silence communally, is that right? And that sort of fascinated me because I haven't practiced that. I wanted to sort of ask, how does that help? What's your experience of that, and how could we do that more? What are the benefits of doing that? Because obviously we practice that, I guess, try to practice it in our solitude prayer moments. Jesus, went away and did that on his own, but that idea of silence, and obviously it's so hard to achieve that because there is so much noise all the time, and maybe that's something that we fear, to actually really lean into that silence. But just like the benefits of doing that in a group and how we could practice that more.
Yeah, great question.
Really good question. Thank you, Lise. The benefits of communal silence, in my opinion, develops in us capacity for waiting. And the invitation that we have in the paradox of the kingdom is now, but not yet. So that we see glimpses of where we are encouraged. I'm thinking of, again, Matthew 6, because I'm always thinking of Matthew 6, of where the prayer that Jesus teaches his followers to pray is, let your kingdom come, let your will be done. But then he declares the arrival of that kingdom in himself. And so we see these moments where the kingdom breaks through, and we see the dead raised, and we see new life, and we see the movement of the Spirit of God. And then we see these, to us, fallow periods where we wait. So we're in Advent, right? We're in this moment. And so much of our worship as existence on earth is to desire to be with Jesus before and ahead of anyone, anywhere, anything else. And so silence puts me in a place where I am reminded of, like, even if I never speak another word, the kingdom is coming. Even if I never do another thing, my anticipation is building. My soul, my spirit is building in anticipation for a day where he will return to claim what is his, to rule and to reign with the creation in the redemption and the renewal of all things. And so much of what we all do all of the time is about busyness to distraction. I think we are culturally supreme at being busy but not really doing much, right? So there's always something to do. We can always keep the wheels turning, keep the wheels turning, keep the wheels turning. Our contemporary obsession with productivity, we are children of the Industrial Revolution. And so up and to the right is always our expectation. More, we've got to produce more, we've got to consume more, we've got to be more. I want to be better than last year. I want to be more informed than last year. I want to be, even in good things, we can want to be healthier than last year. There's this constant sense of striving. And then when we sit in silence, especially with each other, it's the freakiest thing that kind of happens. Of we have to acknowledge in our humanity, there is a time where we will not be dependent on anything other than the presence of God. And it is a training, to repeat myself, it is a training, I believe, to live like forever is real now. And that it places us in a position of spiritual dependence of God. I am, as an act of, it's a subversive act culturally to say, I'm going to be present with other people in this moment, and I'm not going to do anything, and I'm not going to consume anything from anybody else in order to bring that agitation down in me. I'm going to practice what forever is going to look like, where I am with you. And my version of that right now looks like waiting for your return. Would be my
really good.
spin out.
I think I love that. I also think when you're silent with others, it does remind you of how much we need Jesus. And I think doing that with others and then sharing perhaps a sense of what God said to you or how you found that can just be a really good feedback loop for you. And we've had lots of people in our community tell us that they hadn't realized how loud their internal world was until they started to practice silence. And so it's not even about environmental silence or physical silence, but actually to even stop and let your thoughts settle. It can be really, really difficult. And there's a lot of neuroscience tells us what the Bible has always told us, I think, that if our mind is continually on the go, if we never allow it to get bored or to wander or to just be, like we're missing out on something in our kind of inner world, in our emotional world. And so when we do that with others, it's also an opportunity then afterwards to perhaps share, like, how did you find that? Oh, okay, what does that look like? How can we move forward with perhaps the things that you experienced, the feedback loops in that? So I also think it can be really vulnerable. But I think I'm a really big believer that actually really healthy vulnerability builds community, because you're all going to feel awkward, apart from the absolute introverts who are like, my time has come, let's go. But for most people, we don't inhabit that. And I think teaching yourself to be still and to be sometimes bored or to let your mind wander just allows margin in your internal world. And can give really good feedback loops that you can help each other with in community.
There's a quote from Gerald Wilson, just been looking at my notes around some of this, who says, only when we cease our own frantic activity can we begin to experience God's acting for us. Only then can we know that he is God. So there's just something in like learning to stop and I guess I'm not Joel, so I don't want to do his work for him.
Yo,
But
Gerald.
what that tells me is that there is something about trust in silence. There is something about understanding my place in the creation in silence. Sarah and I have the privilege of speaking with leaders often, of like reminding them that the kingdom comes even when you're asleep. Like the kingdom's coming, like even when you don't answer that email.
It isn't all on you. You're
Right.
not the center of the universe.
Right, and I think to practice that with each other in community helps that become real and not just like, oh, it's a thing that you say to somebody that's a bit stressed and a bit busy. It becomes an invitation to like, should we practice this? And in silence, in community, 30 seconds feels like a lifetime. So like becoming well versed in that too. And that is a lesson of like, oh my goodness, I was still and put myself in a place of trust in God for 30 seconds and it felt like time stopped. What do I need to give a little tweak in me? Where do I not trust that Jesus is sufficient in my existence or in my relationships or my whatever it looks like? I think silence together gives us a bit of that. I also think they come hand in hand. You've got to practice silence on your own to be able to practice silence in community really well. Otherwise, you become unhelpful to other people.
Fidgety, I think is the word. But also, communities live in communal silence all over the world for generations, for, when we think about church history, so thinking of saints, scripture, so there are people who do this as a regular practice all the time, so they're the ones we can learn from as well. So go on an adventure with that, Lisa, is what I would say. It sounds exciting. Any other questions or reflections before we wrap it up? Nice. Thank you, Rianne.
I guess thinking about what you guys were just sharing, particularly in the first half with the recap of the whole of the Soul Path year, I guess you can hear everything that you guys have just said and this time that we spent the full year reflecting on everything that you've just said, all the different themes and topics. I don't know which word we settled on, themes or topics, but one of those ones.
The theme and the topic, yeah.
I guess you could feel like you could spend literally, like as we've done, a whole month on silence, a whole month on feasting, a whole month on all these things. So let's use the phrase to an alien, how would you describe then what that looks like in their everyday to try and spend time applying all these soul paths in just 1 week, 1 day? What would that look like in a way that's organically, not in a way of trying to strive for perfection, but I guess in practice, but still trying to master these things and not trying to reach a goal, but still ultimately trying to draw yourself closer to Jesus, if that makes sense.
Great.
Yeah, really good.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Thanks, Rianne. I think, I'm not sure how I would explain to an alien, but I might get the rucksack out again and talk about these as tools. They're practices and pathways, and they are things that we are given in Jesus because of who Jesus is and in view of his mercy. And so at any time, we can unpack what we need for the journey. I think I don't know where I've said this, but like if I'm walking on somewhere for a day and I've packed my backpack, I've packed it for what I need for that day. I don't get everything out every time I stop, I get out what I need. So like if I've stopped for a water break, I'll take the water. If I've stopped because I'm really hot to take a layer off, I might put something in the bag, I'll take something out. So I think for me, it's recognizing that it's not about somehow fitting all these practices in, but it's about saying what will help me find and follow Jesus today, what will help me find and follow Jesus consistently, what will help me to be aware and to grow and be attentive in God's presence. And so for me, this year has been a lot around silence and feasting for me, because those were undercooked. Hey, see what I just did there? Thanks. Undercooked things for me. I find silence very difficult. I find feasting really easy, but I wasn't intentional about it. So for me, that has felt like an invitation of the Spirit this year. I've been aware of that and paid attention to that. And so I valued it. I've thought about the practices and I've planned that in. Now, next year might be all about the exam and prayer, or it might be all about solitude, or it might be a spiritual experience. So I think it's in the walking with Jesus and with the Spirit of God, it's that awareness of what am I being invited into? Like, what am I responding to? And there's a lot of ancient writers and contemporary writers who talk about a life with God like a dance. And he's the lead partner in the dance, but he initiates and we respond. He kind of sets the tone and the rhythm and the pace. And sometimes it's a jive. The Strictly final's just been on. Sometimes it's a jive and it's fast and we're going and he's setting the pace. And sometimes it's like a really slow and beautiful waltz. Do you remember? Sometimes it's a dramatic passo or whatever it is. But like, he sets the pace, he sets the rhythm. I am responding to him. And he's given me these tools that I can unpack. For me, prayer and reading the Bible are the like non-negotiables of all of those things, because they are foundational to knowing God and growing in God. But yeah, the others are tools. And I think before we pressed, I don't know, is it a big red button? But before we pressed the button to record tonight, Katie was sort of sharing a reflection that sometimes what serves you in one moment or era of life doesn't necessarily serve you in the next. And so just being aware of that, like, oh, is that still helping me connect with Jesus, or can I do something different with that?
Great, really good. I would suggest, so going backwards in Romans to go forward, so where Romans 8 tells us, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. And so for an alien not understanding that context, we don't live in a way to honor Jesus because we've got nothing better to do. We live in a way that honors Jesus because all of the creation is being redeemed for his glory.
That's right.
And so then the Spirit calls us into knowing which parts we fetch for at which time. And so the liberation from decay is the mission. So then what are you being invited into as your part of liberating the creation from death? Would
you're
be
co-creating, aren't you?
Yeah, and brought into the freedom and the glory of the children of God. So that for me is why these are not just things that are limited to our Sunday gathered moments or to a way of evidencing that we believe that Jesus is God. But if we take seriously the whole story of God, that there is an invitation which is mind-blowing, and no other system of belief works this way around, to my knowledge. Otherwise I'd be there. But like, this is the supernatural invitation to join the Creator in redeeming the creation, rather than trying to escape it or waiting for it to be over or trying to avoid it or trying to dodge it or trying to pretend it's not happening. We don't have to run away from it, but actually to understand our call to be liberators from death of the whole creation, becomes then a conversation around, Spirit of God, what are you inviting me into today to liberate the creation from death, and do that. And so sometimes we're going to need to be quiet to learn how to do that. Sometimes we're going to need to eat with each other to learn how to do that. Sometimes we're going to have to help people to learn how to do that. Sometimes we're going to have to reevaluate our priorities with our time, our talent, our treasure to do that. That's kind of how and why we build out a life across the rest of it. But I think to be invited into the recreation is how I would start.
And a brilliant place to end, because we're doing John 1 in Advent. So there we are. I'm going to close out in prayer with us. That's one of the things we love to do on Around the Fire podcast. And then once we've done that, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about some changes to the podcast in 2025. Yeah, I am.
I didn't know that. That's
yes,
fun.
in the notes. I'll do that bit.
Thanks.
Don't worry. So I wonder if you just want to pause, maybe just close your eyes if you're safe to do that. If you're driving, please don't do that. But maybe just close your eyes and allow your awareness to become conscious of the loving presence of Jesus. We've talked a lot, you've listened a lot, but I wonder if we'll just go back to those words from Romans 12 and make that our kind of commissioning prayer as we come to the end of Soul Path. That invitation to walk with Jesus, that invitation to know Jesus, that invitation that our whole life is worship. So I'm going to use the words from those first few verses. By your mercy, God, in response to your mercy, we offer our bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to you. We recognize that this is our true and appropriate worship. Spirit of God, would you help us to not let ourselves be squeezed into the shape dictated by this present age? Instead, may we be transformed by the renewing of our minds so that we can make directional decisions, working out what your will is, God, your good, acceptable, and complete will. Help us to love you and ourselves and others well. Help us to know you, to be with you, to imitate you, and to communicate you. Spirit of God, would you help us to grow, and would you fill us with your grace as we walk well with one another on our soul path. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much to everyone in the room for being with us. Thank you to everyone who's been listening or watching online, because this one is like actually a video too. Look at that.
We'll see. Andy might change his mind.
Who even knew? Let me tell you, we've got some changes coming to Around the Fire in 2025. We're very excited. We're going to continue the podcast. We are heading into season 3, and we are going to take 3 episodes every month to do something very similar, unpacking the theme that we're looking at Elim Life Church as a community. And then every month we're going to have sort of a little bit of an Around the Fire special. It might be a question and response episode, it might be a guest, it might be a book or a resource review, or it might be just some random topic that we get asked to share about. So yeah, that's some of the changes for Around the Fire. So thanks so much for listening.
And going to video too, did you say?
Oh no, I didn't. Do you want to say that bit? That's quite exciting.
So we're going to go to video as well. And
I'm going to have to wash my hair. Now, can I just say, podcast days have to be hair wash day now as well.
I like to invest in some hats and stuff, but it'll be fine. So we're going to go to video. We've had some of the feedback that would be helpful to people. We also know people listen to these things in chunks, not in one go. So we're going to do our best to include breaks.
Yes.
So you have a little brain break, and some visuals that will be helpful for people. So yeah, that's what we're going to try next, I guess.
Have a great Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thank you so much. Good job. Thank you, production team.
Bye.
Bless you. Good job.